All right. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Owner Origins Podcast. And I've got a really special guest today here, Russell Ybarra, locally from LaPorte, Texas. And happy to have you. Welcome, Russell.
Thank you.
Tell us, everybody, or tell you about what you're currently doing today. What kind of businesses and things you got going on today?
So I'm the CEO and founder of Gringo's Tex-Mex and Jimmy Changas. We started back in 1993, and we currently have 20 full-service locations and 3 one-offs, Burger Libre, the Lunchbox, and Burritos in LaPorte.
I love Burger Libre, by the way.
Yeah, a lot of people do. And we're currently about to open our 21st full-service restaurant in Tomball at Grand Parkway at 249. So we're staying busy, and we're about to break ground in Richmond, Texas for a Jimmy Changas, which will be the 5th Jimmy Changas, and then we're going to leave the Houston area and go closer to Austin and closer to San Antonio, but not in the city limits, but outside.
That's awesome. Congratulations on such a
Thank you.
successful endeavor. The food industry is not an easy industry to.
No, it's not. It's very difficult because we're only as good as our very last meal we serve.
That's right. That's right. So let's take it back. Let's dial it back a little bit and tell me about your family growing up. What was family life for you growing up back in the day?
So I grew up in LaPorte on 15th Street in a 2-bedroom shotgun home. I had 2 older siblings, and my parents in 1965 built a new house directly behind it, a brick home, about 3,000 square feet, and that's kind of where I spent the next 14 years until I turned 18, and that's just kind of where I grew up, kind of a light industrial area of LaPorte. Yeah.
And how many siblings? So you were third in line?
I'm number 3 of 8.
Okay.
And I always like to think, to myself anyway, that I was kind of born in a little sweet spot where, I got the attention that I needed at the time I needed it, versus some of my younger siblings, which the age gap between the oldest and youngest is 14 years.
Yeah.
And between me and the youngest is 10 years. So I'm just glad I was born where I was, thinking it was a benefit for me.
Yeah, you weren't the oldest, which is the one that everybody's most critical of, and expecting to be the overachiever, and then you're not.
My parents weren't tired.
Yeah, exactly.
When I came along, like my younger siblings are.
So, what was that like? What kind of influence did you get? As you got a couple older siblings, and how did that shape you? How did that help you in some regards?
Well, it was. Growing up with that many siblings, I had 6 brothers and 1 sister.
Yep.
And growing up with that many siblings, I didn't realize at the time, but a parent can only give each child so much attention.
That's a good point.
And so I was left to really just live on my imagination, just always daydreaming. And even the fact that I didn't go to kindergarten, I didn't go to preschool or kindergarten. My very first day of school was first grade, first day.
Really?
And so I was already behind. And I remember I was moved around 3 times because they were trying to find the class that fit where I was at academically. And my first teacher actually was Mrs. Malone, the former mayor of LaPorte's wife.
Really?
Virginia Malone.
Yeah.
And I remember in one case, I was, I guess we were counting something. And it was my turn to go up there. And I didn't know how to count. And so I guess I passed a certain number. So when I got to it, there was some distractions behind me. And I remember just kind of mumbling like I was counting, but I wasn't. Yep. I just did whatever I could to get by. But they caught on quick enough to where they moved me 2 more times. And I was fine with it. But I do remember also Mrs. Malone was very, very strict. She had asked me a question once, and all I remember was I shrugged my shoulders. Yeah, that's all I did, and straight to the principal.
Yeah,
and
completely different upbringing back in those days, right?
Yeah, but it was good. It was good.
That's good. I mean, that's really interesting too, because you make a good point in terms of, having so many siblings, you get kind of lost in the mix. And you got to fend for yourself, right? You got to think for yourself, and you got to figure things out, because mom and dad can't be, because how old is your youngest right after you? How many years after?
3 years.
3 years. Okay. So, yeah.
So I had good 3 years with my mother alone, so to speak, and just my two older siblings. So,
growing up in a family-owned business, at what point, do you have an age you remember as a kid growing up when you kind of realized your dad was his own boss? Why? Was there a point that
it was pretty early on.
Yeah.
I was probably 5, 6 years old when he relocated the El Toro that's there today in LaPorte on Main Street from the building that was across the street. It was a wood frame building. And he built that building in 65. So I would have been 4 or 5 years old. And going to the restaurant on opening night, I remember the chef, Juan Martinez, putting out this huge spread of food. And he was an incredible chef. I mean, he had the whole stuffed pig with the apple in its mouth and did all kinds of really, really cool stuff. One of the things that he really enjoyed making was paella. And my father's cousin, her son, used to be the bat boy of the Houston Astros.
Really?
And he had an older sister who dated some of the baseball players. But most of the players that she dated were from the islands. And Pedro Barbon, for example. And even Jose Cruz, he came to our house once to look at a vehicle that my father had for sale. This was probably in the late 70s. But so growing up, seeing the restaurants, and even at a very early age, having the opportunity to deliver chips and salsa to a table. I think I was 7 years old when I did that. And then working probably around 14 regularly there at night after school. But also, my father had a central kitchen in Baytown, and he would produce a lot of the ingredients for 6 restaurants at the time. And he would produce taco meat, queso, enchilada gravy, and things, hot sauce, and things like that. And then he would ship the product daily to the restaurants on a refrigerated truck.
Okay.
And so I saw all that. And then we call it tamale day, but he would make tamales every week on a Saturday. And as a young kid, I would go there and make tamales. Now, all I would do was there was this conveyor that was just had a long roll of tamales, and then this round wheel that would cut them and the lengths that they were. It was just going over and over in this long extruded tamale. And then we would just, as young kids, just stack them on the tray because they weren't ready to wrap in the husk yet. They were too soft. So we would stack them on the tray, take them to the cooler, and let them harden a little bit. And they would be pulled out and then wrap in the husk. But I remember, I forget what minimum wage was back then, but it was like $2 or something. And in my mind, while I was working, I was just calculating, hey, we're going to be here 5 hours. I'm going to make $10.
Exactly.
And, so I think those experiences were all incredible for me growing up because it's just shining a different light on life.
Exactly.
Work and reward is obviously very important.
So your mom worked in the business too?
No, she was too busy raising the kids.
Okay, so she was. That's a good point.
Very busy. But she ran the household. I mean, she ran it. I mean, she raised us. Our father, obviously, always working. But yeah.
What did you get from each of them? Do you think? I mean, because how different were their personalities, and what do you feel like you got from each one of them?
Well, they both grew up under different circumstances. My father, his parents divorced when he was 3 years old. Of course, he probably didn't know what happened at the time. But he does remember the next time that something significant happened in his life. And it was when his mother had asked him, because he was just being raised by his mother along with his older sister, but his mother asked him to pack his suitcase and that he was going to spend the night with his grandmother. And so the day that happened, and she lived in a house on the east end of Houston in a shotgun home as well. And he remembers that day at 5 years old, looking through the screen door, seeing his mother and his grandmother talking, not realizing at that very moment that he was actually going to be living there permanently. So that really, I'm sure, did a number on him. And so he was fortunate enough to have a lot of aunts and uncles that helped raise him. And so when he was in junior high, he he was playing football and he broke his right arm.
Mm-hmm.
And he broke it at the growth plate, his elbow, and his arm never fully developed again. It stayed smaller than his left arm.
Really?
And so that hindered him in terms of looking for a job. He applied for the city and the county, but he could never pass a physical. He could get a job at the refinery. And so he had no choice but to try to make it on his own. And what he did was he went into business in the restaurant business, not knowing really anything about it, but he got into it.
And was there somebody in particular that brought him into that industry, or did he just venture out on it? Did he? I mean, I'm assuming maybe he went and worked there for a little while. Or?
He did have a relative in Pasadena that had a small restaurant.
Okay.
That, he saw them operating one, so that kind of gave him the idea to open one in LaPorte. And back then, it was just called the LaPorte Mexican Restaurant. Yeah. It wasn't until a few years later that it was called El Foro. Okay.
And so what was your mom like? What was she?
Well, she was definitely she handled all the discipline.
I was going to say, she's a disciplinarian, right?
Yeah, definitely, because, she immigrated to the United States in 1944. Mm-hmm. She was probably 7 years old. And her father was basically a farmer, my grandfather. And when he moved to LaPorte, he bought an entire city block where I grew up and where my parents built their new house. But it was just a pasture of corn and cantaloupes, and he grew other things that he would sell to the grocery stores.
Really?
And so, but he paid $600 for that entire block back there. And so that was her, and she only had one sibling, her sister, her younger sister. And they just, his great grandparents. I mean, they lived right behind us, so I saw them very regularly. I never really saw my father's father because he remarried and moved to Baytown, and then my grandmother, she passed away in the late '60s, and so I really never got to know her.
And so did your mom help your dad, or your grandfather, or her dad, with some of the farming and things like that?
I'm sure she did. Yeah. She never really spoke a lot about that, but I'm sure she did.
It's interesting to see the seeds already from entrepreneurship in the family.
There's actually a picture at Jimmy Chonga's in the foyer as you walk in of my two older siblings, as I don't know, they're 4 or 5 years old. Yeah, sitting on the back of the trailer with my grandfather in the port.
Really? Yeah. I love stories like that. I love to hear, again, some of the origins of how, what's gradually influencing you. What are you seeing? And when do you first, kind of, it becomes an awareness to you, as to what's going on from that standpoint.
Yeah. So, again, growing up and being exposed to everything that I was at such a young age, it definitely shaped me. And of course, you don't realize what it's doing to you at that time. Yeah. But I do remember, for example, one time in the late 60s, my father was purchasing a building in Baytown. Mm-hmm. And it was a restaurant called the Chicken Shack. And it closed it down there on Decker Drive. And my father pulled around the back to just look at the building that he was either he had just purchased or he was about to purchase. And an officer pulls up in his vehicle, in his car, and just asked, "Hey, what are you doing?" And he said, "No, I just bought the building." And so just, and then going, and other experiences like going to a business meeting with my father to purchase some real estate on Interstate 10, where he opened the El Toro at Mercury Drive. Mm-hmm. And what was interesting was the broker, his name was Gene Russell. And of course, my name's Russell, and my father's name is Eugene. So it's Gene Russell talking to Gene Russell. And I got a kick out of that for a reason. But
absolutely. Yeah, well, sometimes you look at it and go, is this a God thing? Is this,
Yeah. Well, we've had a few of those.
Yeah, exactly. So, you got two older siblings. They were both brothers, right?
Yes.
And when you think about you and all your siblings, how do you differ from them? What is it that makes you unique in terms of what you're doing? Because I don't think anybody in your family's got the size business and the things you have today, but I know there's some of them are successful.
Yeah, they're all doing very well, thank God. one of my siblings, Victor, and his son, my nephews, they own Iguana Joe's in Mount Bellevue.
Okay.
And they recently opened up a very successful venue called Cactus Jack's.
Yeah, that's over there as well.
Well,
yeah.
And
I've been there. Yeah.
and doing extremely well, and I'm very happy for them. And then another brother, Johnny Tamales here in Pasadena.
Yep.
And another sibling, or three, run the tortilla factory, El Matador Foods, and they also operate El Toro.
Yep.
So
that's, yeah. So how do you differentiate yourself from them? What is it that, you look at when you look at your siblings and say, whatever it may be, maybe I'm just more analytical of finances, or maybe I'm just more people oriented, or whatever it is. But is there something that you distinguish that's different from you and most of your siblings?
I would like to think that over the years I've learned I've improved because of so many mistakes that I made, some failures. I had to find a way to survive since I didn't go to college. I wasn't a great student at all in school. I may have C's and D's is really all I made. And so working in the restaurants at a young age, I thought that was just going to be where I went. Although the last 3 restaurants that my father opened, he ended up closing. Mm-hmm. So I was seeing a lot of the failures toward the end. And one of the reasons he was being challenged in his business was because his partner was my uncle. Mm-hmm. But they weren't brothers; they were brother-in-laws, the sisters. Mm-hmm. And so my mother and her sister didn't get along, so that forced kind of a division between my father and my uncle. And they were really a great team together, but individually they were not. So my uncle opens up a restaurant in 1960 called Ignacio's, and they were very successful for a while. And then I don't know what happened, but they did end up closing. And then my father was struggling toward the late 70s, around the late 70s, early 80s. And I was kind of more involved with him then, but I was straight out of school, not really skilled in any area to really help him turn the ship. And so he had his commissary where he made all the ingredients for the restaurants. He also had 2 machines. One was a corn tortilla machine, mm-hmm. and the other was a flour tortilla machine. And I just said, you know what, let's put this equipment to work and see if we can't form another company, which is El Matador, mm-hmm. and go out and sell products to other restaurants in Houston. And back in the 80s, that's really all you would sell to was another Mexican restaurant.
Yeah.
Today, tortillas of some type or sort are in every restaurant, anywhere and everywhere.
Yeah.
Whether it's tortillas for quesadillas, nachos, tacos, you name it. If there's tortillas in just about every cooler of every restaurant in America, just about. Yeah.
So nowadays, and all through my upbringing and everything, there's always been an emphasis of going to college, getting your education. So many kids you see getting an MBA, and I've got a daughter in college right now, and she's talking about MBA. I'm like, why don't you just finish your degree and get to work, and then see what what makes sense after that. I don't want to be a professional student, but what are your thoughts? Share your thoughts with, the fact that, your grades were B's and C's or C's and D's, and you didn't want to go to college. It wasn't a good fit for you, but yet you obviously are still an intelligent person, a smart person.
Well, it worked out.
Yeah.
It worked out. But again, so no matter whether you have a degree or don't have a degree, what's most important is that you're able to add value to someone or something in order to receive any sort of compensation or reward. And so a degree in and of itself doesn't do anything for you. It's what you do with it and how you provide value. So that's the beauty of the marketplace. It responds to that. Although I didn't go to college, my oldest son, he did go, and he went to Yale University.
Oh, wow.
And did his undergrad and grad, and then took a few years off, and went to work and got his MBA. And he works with me now. So in some ways, I have a degree, but it's through my son.
Absolutely.
In some ways.
And so to share, what were some of the early days as as you started looking to venture into your own business, because Gringos wasn't your first. And so talk about, some of the early days where you're kind of starting to think about it. You realize that, you need to make a decision, or, you're starting to set the pathway. What were some of the,
Well, I was always trying something, because again, I was trying to earn a living.
Mm-hmm.
And early on, I started a company that would sell sports cars, and these sports cars up there in the Chronicle, how I would run these ads and list these cars, and that didn't work. It didn't work very very quickly.
That's a very limited market, right?
Yeah, very limited. And then I started selling satellite dishes. They were very popular.
I remember that. Yeah,
The
big ones.
Yes, the huge parabolic dishes, fiberglass dishes.
And they turn, every so often during the day.
And so I went into business with my brother-in-law that married my sister. And so we had a little shop here off of, actually it was Center Street, where Center Street goes, I guess that's south, where Jimmy Chonga's is at.
Yeah.
There used to not be a road right there.
Yeah.
So there was a driving range actually at one time. So we were renting a trailer there from the gentleman that owned the driving range. And we had our satellite dish set up, and we even had a demo dish on a trailer that we would go to Baybrook Mall to set up, free demos, so we could look at the satellite dishes. And again, that didn't work out either, although we sold several, and that was an experience in and of itself. One time we were on our way to Baybrook to go do demos on a Saturday, and a big wind gust took that parabolic dish and just flipped over, and my brother-in-law was trying to hold on to his Toyota truck from flipping it, and it was a mess. So we were out of business at that point with that dish. And then one time we were installing a dish, and we had to run the wire from the dish to the house. And my brother, he has an engineering background, and so he wanted to do a straight line and make a 90-degree angle and go toward the house. And then when we finally got inside the house to the back of the television, we were like 2 feet short of cable. So we had to pull all this wire back up out of the ground and then do straight to the house. We could have done that the first time, but we didn't. So, but yeah, it was, and then I did some other things, but everything I was doing, it just wasn't working. It was actually in some ways failing. So I was getting gun shy, like everything I touched was going to fail, and it almost felt me to fail. And so I'm running the factory in the late 80s.
The tortilla factory?
The tortilla factory, with very limited success still. And one of the reasons was because El Toro was affiliated with a Matador.
Yep.
If a Mexican restaurant found out that El Toro was the owner of the factory, they wouldn't buy from him. So it'd be like buying from your competition, which I completely understood. But there were some people who did give me a shot, and one of them was Larry Fortin at Paso Lake.
I remember, Larry.
He gave me a shot at it, and I really appreciated him for doing that because he didn't have to.
Yep.
But I'm the one that lost the account because I did something that I should have done, which was because of our equipment being so outdated. When I went to pull samples for Larry for Paso Lake, I made sure to pick all the good ones. Correct. All of the machine. And what I meant by that is, so the press would press 3 dough balls by 3 dough balls, so 9 total of 6-inch tortillas. But the platens sometimes were off, and one side would be large and the other side would be small. So I would make sure I'd always get the right size tortillas to take to them. But the restaurants, they want consistency in that size.
Absolutely. And you're representing with your samples that, hey, every single one looks just like this.
I won the account with my samples, lost it on when I was actually producing. So that came back to bite me. But it taught me some extremely valuable lessons that I've actually used at Gringo's for the reason.
No, I remember reading part of that from your book. And so, I mean...
consistency in our business is paramount.
Yep.
Truett Cathy from Chick-fil-A once said that you can serve a terrible cup of coffee, just be sure and serve it that way each and every time.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good point.
That's it. I mean, even McDonald's today, I mean, we know what their hamburger is, but you also know what you're going to get every time you go in there, and whatever location you're at.
Do you feel like with a lot of the other failed opportunities, I mean, were you trying to maybe not be in the food industry, but yet it's like...
Well, at one point I did. I actually got out of the restaurant, so that's why I was trying all these things, being one of them. And I didn't want to get back into the restaurant.
Yeah.
But one of the properties that my father owned in Pearland had been an El Toro. And prior to an El Toro, it was a steakhouse for 8 months. And then he was there in Pearland for 6 or 7 years. And then he turned around and leased it to a seafood restaurant called Oak Galveston. And they were there for 3 or 4 years. And the only reason they left was my father was trying to just collect the full note to the bank. He was subsidizing their lease by charging them only half of what the note was. So they relocated, and then he put it on the market to sell and had a buyer. And he did a lease purchase. And it wasn't a lease with the option to purchase. He actually leased it and sold it at the exact same time. And the only stipulation was that the earnest money for that building or for that contract, it wasn't due at the title company for 60 days after he opened. Well, on day 61, Joe Mangiapico, who opened up Mangiapico's, was out of there. And the building was vacant again. So it's now been steakhouse, Mexican restaurant, seafood, and now Italian. So I'm running the factory, and one of my duties back then was to actually write the check to Pearland State Bank for $4,852.10 a month. Very difficult to make because the building was empty and the sales at the other restaurants really couldn't support it. So I called my youngest brother that has Jolly Tamales, and we discussed it. And so we decided to open it, and that's what we did. And really with no budget. I mean, the $10,000 probably at the very most. And 50% of the budget went to purchase a POS system. But we
point of service.
Point of sale system. Where the servers enter the order and it prints out in the kitchen. And I knew that was a very important piece of equipment. But every other piece of equipment in that restaurant, furniture and fixtures, were all used. Everything was used. We would go to a warehouse and I'd find used chairs and I'd bring them in. And that's one of the reasons why we kind of mix our chairs at the restaurant today, as a reminder that none of our chairs match when we first opened. Yeah. And it doesn't really matter, and actually works to our benefit, because if we have to replace a chair, we don't have to find that exact same chair.
Exactly.
Yeah. So it's a little easy to do that.
That's fantastic. And, and my dad growing up in his business, he always said, it's remember, we're the last ones that get paid in this whole deal. And so like when you're talking about, making the check for, a vacant building that you've tried numerous times to pay for itself in some capacity through a tenant or anything. And then when there's nobody there, the bank still requires the check to be paid and the note to be paid. And so you've got to pull it together one way or the other, whether it's, $4,850 less of your check personally.
It was very difficult. And not only the note payment, falling behind on the note payment, but also falling behind on the property taxes.
Yeah.
And then just in general, I mean, we were so backed up on accounts payable that I remember, seeing stacks of bills that we would just pick up that stack and literally just throw it in the trash can and say, look, if we owe it, they'll send us another statement.
Exactly.
We're not getting away with it. We just don't want to see it.
Yeah. And
then my father would have to make deals with the school district in Baytown to get on payment plans with the property taxes. And that's one of the reasons why even today I'm so paranoid about that stuff, that I measure our success in two very simple ways. One of them is making sure that our property taxes are paid on time each year, and we're current with all our vendors. And of course, payroll is always made, and just the basics. But and they're so important, because I can't tell you how many businesses I see that get into trouble with that even today, and it doesn't go away. It just compounds, and especially taxes when July comes around and they throw that penalties, not besides the interest, but the penalties on interest. It just really it runs away from you.
When you think about the restaurant industry, is it really have anything to do with food, or in terms of, food is obviously an intricate component to it all, but yet it's amazing to me how many businesses I see in the food industry, especially because that's such a competitive industry, that just fail. And I don't know if that's just because it's an industry that you happen to see a lot. It's retail, so you see a lot of businesses open, then you see them close, unlike maybe more private sector businesses that you don't see so open to the public as like retail. But how do you view your industry? How do you view the restaurant industry for it to be successful, like you think?
Great question. So is it only about food? No. Is it about food? Yes. Mm-hmm. So food is very important. Sure. And a lot of restaurants will say they specialize in something. And when they say they specialize in something, it's almost like telling me everything else doesn't matter what they serve. Mm-hmm. But literally every single thing we serve matters. It's mm-hmm. important. So we look at our entire menu that way, our entire drink menu and bar selection. But really the restaurant business is about the experience, meaning we cater to all the senses. Every one of the senses. Mm-hmm. And so you have to, as an owner operator, as a restaurateur, you always have to look at your business through the eyes of your guests. What do they see? Yeah. What do they feel? I mean, the other day I was visiting one of our restaurants and I sat down in a booth and a server went out the patio door and a big breeze of wind hit my back. I said, okay, that's not good. Yeah. So we got with our interior designer who does a lot of our refurbishing of our restaurants today, and told her, Stephanie, I said, let's build this wall, this transparent glass wall, whatever we're going to put there. That way it blocks that wind from coming in.
Such a good point. I mean, how many times you don't want to sit by the door that comes in, and every time somebody walks in, if it's hot or cold or windy.
I was at a high-end restaurant last night, and where they sat as there was a steakhouse. The air conditioning vent was straight up as one of the line skinny ones, but I felt the breeze just hit my back, and it was very uncomfortable. So, I mean, there are solutions to everything. Yeah. And especially, like, a lot of restaurants don't think about lighting. But lighting in restaurants is so important because it can make or break an experience just by how the table's lit or not lit. Mm-hmm. Some restaurants, it's so dark in there. Yeah. And I asked myself, the poor chef, they go through all this trouble to create these beautiful plates. And then no one sees it. Yeah, it's so dark. You're trying to figure out what's what on the plate. And really, the table should only be spotted and not the guests sitting at the table because you don't want to light people's faces. Mm-hmm. And so, and then music. There's a restaurant in Houston called Hillstone. Yeah,
it used to be the Houston.
Yes. And
I like that place.
And one thing you'll notice is they have a speaker almost over every single table. And so the reason they do that, and we've added so many more speakers to our restaurants, but you don't want whatever music you're playing, you don't want to know which direction it's coming from. It needs to be so well balanced that you hear it, but only for you. And the reason they probably do this also at every table is because if one table has to speak louder or talk louder because it's too loud where they're sitting, and the table next to them will have to talk louder, and just the whole room
and then it's just a big.
Who's allowed us to make, be heard? So
that's a good point.
And so of course taste and the sight, curb appeal, landscaping is so important. Yeah. One of the first things you'll notice at most restaurants that are trying to cut cost is they say let's not worry about the landscaping. Let's not worry about repairs and maintenance. If something's broke, put a sign, we'll repair it later, what have you. But guests notice all these things. And they notice them because at the end of the day, all businesses, we all compete by comparison. So they're going to compare you to someone else that they just went to. But we also, one of the things I'm very proud of is that we continually put money back into our older establishments. Mm-hmm. Texas City, Gringo's, we just went through a major remodel. It's been a fortune, but that building, I acquired it in 1999 from Darden, which is Red Lobster.
Mhm.
And they built that building in '93. We took it in '99, so it's been or closed for a number of years, but they were probably only there 3 years. And we just did a major facelift. Even the restrooms are completely remodeled, and it's a beautiful restaurant. And we're seeing the results of those improvements now.
Yeah.
Numbers, because at the end of the day, if we're established, why lose the value in that being established by not maintaining your properties? If you go build a new building, then you have to get reestablished all over again if you're a different name brand. But a lot, even in our kitchens, we repair our kitchen tiles as quickly as they go out. One pops up, or grout lines, because again, by delaying it, it only it increases how it starts to diminish. And then your employees in the kitchen or the front of the house, if they see that the owner himself doesn't care about repairs or maintenance, then they're not going to care. And it's a ripple effect of that.
It's a culture, right? I mean, it's from, and you're right. And one of the things over the last few years, and I think about it a lot of times too, when I go to someplace and eat, and I've done it. I've done it at your Gringos in LaPorte. I've done it at Papa's Barbecue or something, and I'll roll up and I'll do a curbside just because I don't have the time or got a big order, and I'll be sitting there in the car. And, and I'm not always looking at my phone. So I look around, I look at the landscape, I look at the condition of the building, I look at how things are kept up, and it gives you an impression as to how things are cared for overall. Because I think about it as, well, if this isn't taken care of, well, what does your kitchen look like? And then how does the, because then I think food, I think, quality of food and everything. That's an important part of what I see. And you're right. I remember walking into a restaurant once, and good restaurant, but for whatever reason, somehow, like the sewer smell, like something had leached out from either one of the bathrooms, a problem. Man, that kills your appetite right out. It
does, and that's a big problem. When we opened up Jimmy Changa's on Center Street, we had a sewer gas smell, and you have to find the source.
Yeah.
So we had to do what they call a smoke bomb through the vents and all the pipes, and to find out where it's leaking. But what had happened was when we did an add-on section, and apparently when the framers were nailing into the wall, they nailed right into a pipe, one of the vent pipes, and so that was the source. And but it can happen anywhere. We've had pipes not connected in the wall; they're just disconnected. So it can happen, but you got to find it, because you won't get rid of it unless you find the source and solve it. So
going back to the very beginning, in 92 or 93? 93. And you're going to lease the building that's had 4 failures in it over there in Pearland. You $10,000, you and your brother-in-law, right? You said
your
youngest brother. That's right. Your youngest brother. And so, what are some of the things you're lining up? POS system, but obviously, payroll is a big deal. How are you thinking about everything, you and he, in terms of A, getting it started, and B, building it to at least get to whatever first thresholds you're trying to get to?
So going in under those circumstances was a benefit, in that prior to that day, January 11th, 93, my focus, although I had no skill set, my focus was still to make money. That was my primary focus. Going in after January 11th, 93, my focus was no longer about making money. It was about producing the absolute best product that I knew how to make that on that day, at that time, and then offer it at the absolute best value that I possibly could. And so that was my focus, and it's still my focus today.
So then, what changed that? What gave you that epiphany? What changed?
Failure.
Yeah,
all the failures.
Point. Yeah.
I mean, I lost a house. The first house I bought.
Mm-hmm.
My wife and I got married. We lived in a garage apartment next door to my parents. Mm-hmm. 2 years later, I bought a house in Creekmont in LaPorte, and lost that to foreclosure. And although I knew I was going to lose it or let it go, I didn't lose any of my other credit. I still paid all my credit cards and everything else. And then, but was able to purchase another house before that. So I was trying to position myself, step back, my house mortgage was cut in half. And so my second son was just born. And then I had a Ford Bronco that I had to return to the dealership because I couldn't no longer afford the $420.91 payment. And I always tell people the difficult numbers are the ones you always remember in your life. So I returned it. And I remember when I was walking away from the dealership, I turned around to look at it one last time. And I told myself, okay, I'm down, but I'm not out.
Yeah.
Meaning I'm broke, but I'm not poor. I think it's a state of mind. So going in again and experiencing all these failures before, it was the best thing that ever happened to me, really. It was about best teachers, but it just changed my focus. And then I also knew that if I wanted to grow the company, if I wanted to experience the life that I wanted, it was going to take more than one restaurant. And in order for it to take more than a restaurant, it's going to take a team. And then almost from actually this coming June will be 30 years that I hired first significant team member that helped grow Greenies apparently. That's John Fernandez. And he'll be with me 30 years this coming June.
And is your brother still tied with you to the business?
He's the one that owns Giant Tamales.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Yeah, he went on his own in 1997.
Okay. Okay. Good deal. It's interesting to hear about the failures and the setbacks, and yet still the persistence of doing it. I mean, we might have casually talked about this on the side, but as you reflect on everything, and I always think nature versus nurture, if you were orphaned off, didn't even grow up in this family or anything, and grew up with a different family that weren't entrepreneurs, do you feel you would have still owned your own business, like it was part of your DNA? Or do you think, how do you measure how much of the influence the environment, your family and everything played in you owning your own business?
I think a lot of it is environment.
Yep.
Sure. I mean, 100%. Where do I think my personality would have taken me? Probably in sales of some sort.
Yep.
If I believed in a product, if I believe in anything, I could sell it.
Yep.
And even the fact that I had a customer when I was selling before Gringos and I was running on Matador selling tortillas, I approached a restaurant in the Bay Area called Dos Mas.
Oh.
And
Dos Mas.
right there at Highway 3 and Bay Area Boulevard.
Cantu. I went to school with, I'm trying to think of, is it Oscar Cantu or the son?
Well, David Cantu, maybe?
Well, I know his dad and his uncle owned it, and I graduated with his son.
Okay.
And I'm trying to remember his first name.
Well, anyway,
but we used to go there because then he knew the family.
I approached to sell product to him, and he told me to my face, Russell, I will never buy tortillas from you. That was a challenge for me. When he told me that,
because of the El Toro connection.
Yes.
Yeah.
But 6 months later, he was buying them. Because business is really about relationships.
Yep.
It's about people. And if people like you, they will buy from you.
100%. People doing business with people. And I think to your point earlier, when you said, my mindset was all about making a profit.
All right.
That wasn't the key. I mean,
no, it's not.
Yeah.
You're putting the cart before the horse.
Exactly. So book inspiration. So you wrote the book Enchilada Entrepreneur,
Yes.
which I've read, and I think it's fantastic. It's got, I think, not only, and you get 10 lessons in life and business, and I think those things are absolutely crucial. What inspired you to write the book? What brought you to that?
Well, I know my existence on Earth won't be forever, so I wanted. I obviously want the company to live long after I'm gone, but I wanted those that are curious, that work for the company, to understand the mindset of how I approached business and some of the things I believe that worked for me despite not having a formal education. And one of the habits that I practiced early on was sense of urgency.
Yeah.
And, that sense of urgency is what really got Michael Berry to write the foreword.
Yep.
And he actually wrote about that
Yep.
in the foreword. The fact that Tillman Fertitta provided a blurb for the book,
Yep.
those things don't happen by accident. And it's because I've always responded with a high level of urgency to anybody's request for anything at any time, because people that do that stand out versus those that just, hey, I'll get to it when I get to it. And I've just never liked that. And I guess it probably came from the fact that when I would work at El Toro during lunch, a lot of the patrons only had so much lunchtime available. We were always operating in a high level sense of urgency. And I guess that's where it originated. But I've always applied it throughout everything I do in life, and it has helped quite well.
Well, and what kind of things in your life have changed since writing the book? Obviously you're out and about doing a lot more. We did the banquet for the Economic Alliance, fireside chat and everything. What's life been, now a year removed after it being released?
Well, I have enjoyed speaking to different groups. I think you can only get better as you practice it more. But I just love, I've helped several other restaurateurs. I have kind of an open door policy. If they reach out to me, they're more than welcome to come to our kitchens, and we're an open book. I want them, if they're able to improve their operation by visiting our operation, I think it's a win-win, because if they get better, we get better.
Yep.
And that's really what, the free enterprise system is all about. Capitalism is all about. It's just improving at every level that we can. And that's the fun part. But I had a gentleman reach out to me after reading my book. His family, he's a CPA, but he kind of just stumbled back into the family business. He has 2 Mexican restaurants up on the north side of Houston, north of Conroe. And he just reached out to compliment the book, and I forget exactly what all he said in his email, but I responded, hey, if you'd like to visit our store, here's Aaron, our general manager. Reach out to him, and he'll be more than happy to set it up for you. And that's what he did. And so he sent me a picture of him with Aaron at the restaurant, and I enjoy doing that. I met a gentleman that reached out to me in Kingwood.
Yeah.
Has a restaurant called Local Cantina, Miguel, and does a fantastic job. His sister owns a restaurant in the Woodlands called Jalisco, and her background was with Chef Hugo in Houston. And so I've just really enjoyed meeting all these young entrepreneurs that are around the same age when I started Gringos.
Yeah.
And it's fun. That stage of life of starting something new is fun. It's also scary, but the beauty of starting when you're young is you have more time.
Yeah.
And so if you're going to make mistakes, make them as young as you can.
Yeah.
Because you can always grow to something else. So.
One of my favorite excerpts in your book, and I like to tab things, and a lot of times I highlight things and everything like that. But I love the story of Herman Cortez and the philosophy of burn the boats. And and for those who don't realize, obviously Herman Cortez is a Spaniard coming over to Mexico essentially and they have so many soldiers or so many people with them, and Herman Cortez wants to conquer. I can't remember if it was the Incas or the Mayans and so, but they're outnumbered.
Right.
And obviously a lot of the sailors are like wanting to, hijack the boats and go back. And so he burns them. Talk about how that applies in terms of being a business owner, because you commented on it earlier, and I always have seen business owners are cut from a different cloth. Only 6 to 7% of the U.S. population, owns an established business, which means 94% of people, don't know what that's all about in terms of the pressure. You talked about paying bills that you may not have the money for, going in debt, having a stack of notes, foreclosing on your home. Everybody sees the glamorous side. Everybody sees Russell Ybarra, writing a book and successful and got a lot of restaurants. But again, for the aspiring business owners that are looking at this and saying, I'm going to do this, Talk about that mentality of burn the boats, that applies with a business owner.
Well, when going back to January the 11th of 93, the day we opened, we only opened up half the building because we didn't have enough money to buy used tables and chairs for the other half. So we opened with 25 tables. So 100 guests is all we sat.
Good.
And we had the neon sign in the dining room that we were not using hanging in the window. And at 11 a.m., I pulled that string, standing there waiting for that very, very first car to pull in. And I knew the history of the building.
Yeah.
And I'm sure whoever was going to patronize us, and that car finally did pull in. So I knew this person knew the history of this building, but they were still willing to give this building another shot.
Little cool.
And I had a high sense of gratitude at that moment. And I still carry it with me today, because when we open a new store, I will tell our staff that, listen, do y'all realize how many cars go up and down this freeway?
Yeah.
Do you realize how many restaurants are all around us? Yet they pulled into our parking lot to patronize us. Everyone should have a sense of gratitude. And every person that works for us, a lot of people see themselves as an employee, but they're really in business for themselves. I'll tell our servers, listen, you have a 3 or 4 table section, maybe a 5 table section. That is your restaurant. We're providing you everything, and now you're going to get a percent on what you sell.
It's a good point.
20%, 25%. Some make more than that.
Yes.
But so you're in business. You just don't see it that way, and you have to see it because you're selling your time and your service. And if you approach it like that, you will be a lot more successful than those that see it differently. And so there's no turning back when burning the boats. I mean, when I pulled that string, there really was no turning. I had nothing else to hold back.
Yeah.
And it was a defining moment. So I never want to forget it.
It's an incredible. It's daunting for a lot of people. You talk to a lot of people, and they're like, "There's no way I could do that."
No, it's not for everyone.
Commission only, or just starting off in debt. My dad, I remember one time asked us about our house. My mom and I was 13 years old or something, and it's probably a similar situation as you had with your house. And he's like, how important is it for us to live in a house versus an apartment? And I remember just thinking, I like a house. I like a backyard. And my mom's like, yeah, what are you talking about? I think, he handled all the finances. And years later, I found out he paid the mortgage with a credit card for, 4 or 5 months just to keep us happy. But then he worked even more and to do things. And so it's like, you don't realize the risk. That's why I think I like Burn the Boats so much, because, there's no turning back,
right.
Or going back is very harsh.
Well, there's definitely a different mindset when there's no going back.
Yeah. Yep. You touched on a lot of failures that helped shape you and things like that, which you talk about in the book, which I think are very good because they're the best life lessons or the best lessons in general. Talk about that real expensive seafood platter.
Oh, yeah. So, and that was a great experience, too.
Yeah.
So, our 5th location in Stafford, next door to us, was a macaroni grill that had closed down. And one of the reasons they closed, they had a fire, and they just never reopened it. Yeah. So, we decided to opened up a seafood restaurant and called it Gringo Seafood Kitchen. But it was Gringaux.
I remember it, actually.
And we hired a former Pappas seafood restaurant chef to help us develop the menu. Our GM/KM was a former Houston's chef and Cheesecake Factory manager. And we hired a really good interior designer, and Davis Wilson, the architect, did the exterior design. But we put a really great team together, and the facility was beautiful. Maybe it was too nice. We don't know. But when we opened, almost out of the gate, we didn't really do the numbers that we were expecting. And usually a restaurant will start. Their sales will be extremely high at opening, and they'll kind of dip and level off. But this one never even took off. So we struggled with it for a year and 3 months, and rather than keep putting up with it, we just decided to close it. But the beauty of that was, okay, so we closed it. We learned, what did we learn from it?
Yeah.
And the chef that was with us, Barry Fisher, he, since he came from Houston to Hillstone, one of their philosophies was making sure that they purchased the highest quality ingredients. And not just, ingredients on a different level.
Yeah.
Stuff that we would even never think about. But we could buy regular salt, for example, and they would use this specialized kosher salt and just other ingredients. But anyway, so when we closed it, a few years later, we developed chimichangas. And we were starting to formulate all the recipes for Jimmy's, knowing that one of the things we were going to do is basically be the same as Gringo's, but different. And what I mean by that is, for example, Gringo's has a yellow queso, chili and queso, and Jimmy's has a white chili and queso. And so there's some subtle differences like that throughout the menu and ingredients. But one particular recipe that we're working on to make it a little different than Gringo's was the enchilada gravy. And normally we would use a lot of beef trimmings that we would just grind and make the gravy out of. And because of how we made it, I didn't particularly care for it myself. So I said, no, we're not going to do that anymore. And again, we're about to develop another restaurant concept with the Gringo Seafood Kitchen failure behind me. So I didn't want another failure. So it forced me to have a little paradigm shift in that I told myself, you know what? If I won't eat it, I don't want to serve it. So we kind of look at our ingredients that way. Is this what I would eat? And if it is, then we use it. If it's not, then we won't. And simple as that. But that came out of Gringo Seafood Kitchen. Something as simple as that.
What was the reason for the failure? Was it just a marketplace, or what did you derive from that?
I had my thoughts on it, but it's again the Stafford area is what they call a between market, so to speak. Meaning most of the traffic that goes in front of you are on their way to Sugar Land. They don't live there.
That's a good point.
Yeah. And even Sugar Land, not Sugar Land, but Stafford itself, they have a lot of industrial and commercial developments all throughout the city. Light industrial. And so, not a lot of residents, not as many as you would think. So it was just a bad location, but it was fantastic.
You think you'd ever venture into another Cajun seafood?
No, probably not at this time. Our plate's full with Gringos. And we're having fun with that because we really want to test its potential, especially going outside the Houston market, to Shirts or Cibolo, Texas, and Kyle, Texas.
So if you've got Gringos going well, what year was it when you started Jimmy Chonga's, the first one? In
2011. We opened on 1/11/11.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And obviously 18 years on the day from when Gringo's over. Was it January 11th too?
It was January 11th.
But what made you want to do a different? Did you have an idea of the market segment that was out there that you're saying, man, there's a segment of people out there that want this kind of, why would you do that?
Well, that's a great question. One of the reasons we did it was because our COO today, Heather McKim, she had brought it to my attention. Hey, the restaurant on Center Street closed up. Originally it was a Tater's. You remember Tater's?
I very much so. I worked with Ken Phelps at the time.
So do you know Todd East?
Yeah, I know Todd East, and I know the chef and everybody, and watched the whole process. I was working with Ken the whole time it was going.
So after Tater's, it was a Mexican restaurant. And then they closed up, and we just approached them, and we got a good buy on it. And so we said, obviously it couldn't be a Gringo's because there's another one 2 miles away.
Exactly.
So we said, well, it had to be a different concept. And then my youngest son actually drew the logo, the monkey logo.
Really?
And the reason we drew it was because we wanted a logo a caricature,
Yeah.
a cartoon character of well, Jimmy Changa is a kind of a play on words. He was Chimichanga,
Yep.
and Jimmy Changa, Changa was monkey.
Yep.
So that's why we have the little face. But
Yep.
but we, Buc-ee's has done well with the beaver.
Exactly.
We did it. But funny enough, we actually did get a cease and desist from Buc-ee's.
Really? They go after everybody.
But they knew they weren't going to get anywhere, so they dropped it. They didn't pursue it. But,
My goodness. That's
they,
pretty sexy.
I guess they think they own cartoons or something.
I guess so.
But and there have been some brands that have really deliberately trying to copy them too.
Oh, yeah. No.
But yeah, so we also figured that if we have a sister brand and we have two Gringos that are 10 miles apart, we possibly put a Jimmy's in between each Gringo and kind of keep your competition at bay.
Yeah.
In some ways.
Well, yeah, because I mean, it is a different experience when you go to Jimmy Changa's, and
Yes.
and so I feel the food is different. And there's definitely, I never thought about the queso difference or anything like that.
And
But
the rice is different. The
Yeah.
rice at Jimmy's is a traditional Spanish rice, which this has a red tint.
exactly.
To the tomato paste, and the Gringos is the yellow.
Yep.
Yellow rice.
Yep. So as you're humming along, you've had, life lessons in business, life lessons with family and all the experiences there. You're cruising along well with, growing the business and everything like that. But something that you noted in your book that I wanted to ask you about was, as we get older, we suddenly start to recognize health isn't the same as what it was when we were in our 20s and 30s.
Right.
And so you had a little bit of a health scare. How has that suddenly changed or made you think or look at things any different, if it has at all, in that capacity? But talk about that, please.
Well, sadly, the very first person that I hired, his name is Russell Ybarra. His nickname was Dos Caballos because he literally did the work in two men when we first opened, but he was the kitchen guy that I had to hire. And the nice thing about Hugo was that we had already worked together at one of my father's restaurants in the 80s, so I kind of knew his work ethic. But I hired him. He's the only team member who's been with me since the very, very first day.
Really?
But anyway, tomorrow is his wife's funeral. She passed away recently from cancer. So, yeah, so, you do realize that, how short life really is.
Yeah.
And you just want to do really as much good as you can while you're still here. And, that's the beauty of Gringos. Our third core value is reinvesting in our team members and our community. We do it on such a large scale that that's what makes me most proud. Not really the money we make, but because of how well we do our job, we're able to impact lives. We have a full-time pastor, which I don't think very many restaurants have.
Really?
Sam Hernandez. He's been with us 14 years now, I think.
And that's his full-time job?
That's his full-time job now. He actually started off as a general manager.
Okay. And he helps anybody that is in need of anything in terms of.
So when you look at our demographic of our team members, our employees, they're mostly young folks and different stages of life and different challenges. So they could be something. I mean, we've had he held a class recently in our corporate office with 7 or 8 team members that were suicidal. And today, because I blame a lot of it on social media because, when I was growing up, I didn't have access to what's going on outside my neighborhood, outside our streets, and now kids are exposed to so much so they're always comparing themselves to others, and it's unfortunate, but it's had a huge negative effect on society.
Yeah, you've talked about that even in your book as well, as far as some people with what their image, what does everybody think of them, and they're trying to portray an image that maybe it's not their true self, and it ends up being to their detriment. And that's really amazing though, because again, I've always felt this way. For you and I growing up, church was involved, or religion was involved in everything. At school, you could have a prayer, you did the Pledge of Allegiance, with God listed in it. you can have prayer at a ball field, and prayer was, and religion, faith was in government.
Right.
And now we're looking at, a lot of years removed of all that. And I think a lot of people struggle with that. And I think that's really good to be able to provide, because, as you're young, you're 7 foot tall and bulletproof. You think you can handle everything because you're physically strong, but eventually, you have to feel or look for, what is the a higher purpose or higher calling for yourself, and that it's not all on you. But I think that's a struggle for a lot of people. So that's really neat that you do that, because I don't know of any businesses that may have that. 2,600 employees you have, right?
Right. Yeah, he's busy. I mean, he's like a first responder. I was at one of our restaurants about a year ago or so, and I walked in. I noticed one of our kitchen employees wasn't there, and I asked, "Hey, where's so and so?" And he said, "Well, he had to leave because his apartment caught fire." Move into a temporary apartment, and then once, actually, it's this permanent new apartment, and we're able to provide them new furniture. We established a foundation a few years ago in honor of my parents, because of what I was able to witness them doing as a young child. They did a lot for the community and beyond. But so seeing all that, and we established the Tex-Mex Legacy Foundation in their honor to help employees, to help the community, and whatever comes up. Yeah.
And how, talk about how much the community and your part in the community plays a role in owning a business. How involved are you in the community?
I'm involved with different organizations, but not a lot, so to speak, locally, mm-hmm. But we do help, whether it's Little League. But we our patrons, the community, is a stakeholder in our business. We can't survive without the community, so we always have to be there for them. We rarely ever say no to any kind of request. Mm-hmm. We'll give them something, but we have a full-time person that handles all that. Okay.
Good.
That's all they do and there's quite a few. Yes, a lot of them come through.
And you're very much involved at Camp Hope?
Very much involved at Camp Hope. So yes, Michael Berry, the radio talk show host, on Self-Bizarre Talk Radio. Mm-hmm. He's now nationally syndicated. So he's in 73 markets, which is incredible.
That's needed.
And the beauty is, he'll every now and then mention my name, but mention kind of the things that we do for the community. That's really the best part about it. But he's the national spokesperson for the PTSD Foundation of America, Camp Hope, and I'm on the board of directors. And it's a peer-to-peer counseling program. It's a residence program where they'll come in for 6 months and go through this very detailed program that helps them basically get back on their feet, because most of the time when they call the 1-800 number, they have a gun to their head. They're ready to pull the trigger. And so currently we're losing anywhere from, and they don't know the exact number, but it's upwards of 44 servicemen, veterans a day to suicide. And so that we can house upwards of 125. And if we exceed that, we will find a way to make sure that they have somewhere to go. But it's completely free, and it's a great organization. So we're proud to be a part of that. One of the things we did a few years back, we established a combination plate called the Plato Soldado, mm-hmm. which means soldier plate. Mm-hmm. And there's a great story in the book about it, but mm-hmm. it's a combination plate with kind of my favorites: the cheese enchilada, la fajita taco, and the tamale, and guacamole, beans, rice. But anyway, it's we donate $2 from every plate that we sell at all 20 locations. Mm-hmm. And so to date, we're around the $1.6 million mark for that one combination plate a month, which all that goes to Camp Hope to help their budget. Because since I'm on the board, I see what it costs to maintain that facility. But also 100% of the proceeds from the book sales goes to Camp Hope also.
That's fantastic. Yeah. Those soldiers, what they have to endure overseas and then to come back and try to reacclimate to a life that, I mean, they're so traumatized. They need help. They absolutely need help. So I appreciate you doing that for certain. What's your wife's name?
Monty.
And she's not involved in anything regarding the business, is she? Or
No, don't.
how has she played a role in you over the years in terms of running a business and everything? What kind of ways has she influenced you and helped you?
Well, she's obviously been there to handle everything household related.
Mm-hmm.
And that could be everything from making sure the pumps working properly in the pool, or you name it. I mean, she takes care of all that. And of course, she helped raise our kids. But a funny story, when our oldest son was about to go into kindergarten, she enrolled him at Faith Christian Academy in Pasadena, a private school. And at the time, we didn't have Gringo. So in order to help offset that cost, that expense of tuition, she was a teacher's aide there at the school. And then later on became a kindergarten teacher.
Okay.
And so one of her students, she would come to class. Her name was Lindsay Perkins. She would come to class and tell her teacher, Monica, my wife, that her daddy was the general manager of Papacitos in Webster. And so around that time, I think I had the one Gringo, so Carolyn. And so she would, my wife would come home and say, yeah, one of my students, her dad is the general manager of Papacitos. So I kind of just followed that away, knowing that. And then when I started building the Gringos in LaPorte and started construction in 1995, I was already searching for my second general manager, and I learned that Joel Perkins, Lindsay's father, was no longer with Papacitos, that he had gone to the Kima Cantina, which is now the Aquarium restaurant.
Yeah.
And there was a gentleman down there that owned 3 restaurants, the Brass Parrot, Flying Dutchman, and the Kima Cantina. Yes. Hans Gillibarn was his name. And so I learned that Joel was working at the Kima Cantina. He was working there. And at the time, our family was also delivering tortilla products to that restaurant.
Okay.
So my cousin made a delivery one day, and I said, Chuck, tell Joel that I'm looking for a general manager to run second Gringos in the port. And so Joel reached out to me almost immediately, and we met. We probably met 5 different times, and I didn't hire him. I was putting him off because I didn't have the money to really bring him on to pay him. So I was waiting until the building was closer to completion. And finally, I guess during one of the last times we met, he said, Russell, if you hire me, I'll run that restaurant as if I owned it myself. So I was going to hire him anyway, whether he said that or not, but I ended up hiring him.
Nice to hear that, right?
Yeah, it is. And he actually did. So much so that he was able to franchise the 4th Gringos, which is the one on 45 at Fuquay. That was his first store.
Oh.
And he took that one store and was able to open up 4 more. He opened up Champions, Cypress, Spring, and the Woodlands. And after COVID, that kind of threw everyone in disarray. He was, I don't know if he was struggling to get restaffed, especially in the server area. He was short-staffed on servers. And so my son and I were looking at this chain of restaurants in Scottsdale, Phoenix area called Barrio Queen. And they were selling 5 or 6 units. And I just thought they were overpriced. My son thought they were worth this. My CFO thought they were worth this, and I thought they were worth less. But we didn't acquire them. Instead, my son said, "Hey, why don't we just see if Joel wants to sell this 5 units back to us?" So I met with Joel in the Woodlands at True Foods, and I gave him a 1-sheet offer just to see an outline of what it looked like. And he looks at it and says, "They'll put this together?" I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "Well, let me talk it over with my wife." I think that same afternoon, he said, "Yeah, we'll take it." And then we kind of negotiated some other numbers after we got all the financials, and we finally settled on a number. But It was an 8-figure deal. He is retired, and the best part about it for him is 2 of the properties he owns the real estate.
So he gets a rent check.
He gets a rent check every month. And we've made a lot of improvements to those properties, and it's a triple net lease, so he just collects rent to pay anything else.
And your wife originally made that connection.
And what's also interesting is when he was working, and this is the beauty of it, when he was working at the Kima Cantina, knowing that he was with Pappas previously, I thought he had maybe left Pappas because he wanted to go work with Kima Cantina.
Yeah.
But he didn't. He left because he had been demoted, relocated to another location. His salary was cut by 2/3, and his 4th daughter was just born.
Oh, wow.
And we talk about it all the time, and we just had dinner recently, but our lives kind of intersected at the exact right moment. And when I opened up the second store, knowing how the Pappases had continued to operate, I told myself if I had any hope of being anything like them, I had 1 or 2 choices. Hire someone that worked for them, or go work for them. I obviously hired someone that used to work for him to tap into that mindset of operations, systems, and procedures. And he brought over some individuals with him that had worked with Pappas, and some of them are still with us today.
And you mentioned it in your book some, but you have a pretty open collaboration with all of your management and your, the various executives and people that you hire in order to, get as much insight as you can from everybody, right? I mean, it seems like
well, we can learn so much from each other if we just share experiences. And again, there's always room for improvement. That's we approach everything that way.
Yeah.
Everything, design, and everything.
How many kids do you have? I know you have
2 boys, 6 grandchildren.
Okay. Yeah. And how are they different from you? What do you see from them that is different from you? Kind of like how we compared you to your other siblings.
Well, they're different in that their experiences were different growing up, and so I don't expect anyone to be like me. I wouldn't want them to be like me.
Yep.
I think everyone just needs to be their own person and find their own way at the end of the day.
And so they went to school. Obviously, you said one.
My oldest did, yes.
Yeah. So okay, good deal.
My youngest one, who was more like me, at one time had a gun store called Battleground Firearms.
Mm-hmm.
He also had a talk show about guns called Battleground Talk Radio or something.
Yeah.
On the radio, and a couple other things that he's done.
So your youngest is more like you. The oldest is it more like your wife or different altogether?
Personality-wise, like my wife, yes, but he and I balance each other out quite a bit, actually.
And
he's more type A for sure.
And he's in the business with you.
Yes, he handles all of our real estate development and other things, and even a lot of our estate. Like we did our estate planning a few years back, and he just loves to dig in all that stuff.
Yeah,
he just loves to dig in.
It's good, and obviously
you have to have it.
You have to have it, and you got to have somebody you trust. It's better.
Well, at the end of the day, I mean, it gets passed on, and like I tell people, I'd never looked at anything that we own. I don't like to use the word own. So I just really manage stuff. All these restaurants, I'm just managing them.
Yep.
And if I do it well, I'll continue to grow and get more restaurants to manage. But at the end of the day, you pass it on to someone, and it's their responsibility at that point.
And what keeps you going and wanting to continue to grow? What inspires and pushes you constantly?
Well, one, obviously creating opportunities for others. It's nice to see, for example, our general manager in College Station started off as a busser, and now he runs probably one of our top 2 stores in the company.
Yeah.
So opportunities, the fact that we're still able to improve lives, impact lives, everywhere we go, whether it's schools or you just name them. It's just we just always impact the community.
Being able to give back here. And, you're obviously at a point where, I mean, financially, success-wise, in terms of comparison to, you can stop if you wanted to.
I could, but I also enjoy I enjoy travel, and it's not. I mean, it's pretty expensive. It's not cheap, and so I've traveled all around the world and stayed at some incredible properties, and I enjoy that. So that's kind of my thing.
Yeah.
Travel.
Now, I notice on social media and stuff, I follow you on X and everything, and you love quotes.
Yeah.
What is your favorite quote? What is a quote that I know you got a lot of them, but is there one that you?
Probably the one that helped me a lot early on was a quote from Napoleon Hill in his book, The Law of Success in 16 Lessons. He said that within every failure is the seed of an equivalent success, and that resonated with me because I had so many failures.
Yeah.
And so knowing that these failures are actually the same as a success, it's just the opposite spectrum, it helped me at a critical time. But what I really like, and what you'll see on X is a lot of quotes of stoicism.
Yep. I
wish stoicism was taught in our schools. I think it would help kids a lot.
Especially right now, that's just like we're talking about, a lot of the mental health, a lot of the suicidal tendencies and things, and it's like there's no confidence and nothing built within themselves to know that they can overcome something.
Right.
And that's a good example, and I hope a lot of people can see what all's involved. That's why I think it's so important to get some of the messaging out of what owners, the burden, the financial burden, the emotional burden of you don't have 2,600 employees, you have 2,600 families that depend on everything continuing on so that they can raise their kids and build a legacy for themselves and be able to have something to reflect on that is something proud, and then their legacy goes on with their kids and everything like that. And so that's a crucial component, and I think that's where a lot of kids need a lot of help in that capacity from that standpoint. I like your reference in your book too about finding people that are doing what you want to do and are very successful at it, and then gleaning from that. Is there one or two people or something that worth sharing that you said
Well, like I've had a lot of young men or business people approach me and ask me or tell me about an idea they have, and I'll always ask them. I said, is there already someone doing what you want to do? Because that's the first place you want to start. Mine was seeing how Pappas ran, Pappasitos, Pappas Seafood, Pappas Barbecue. And if you can find someone that's doing what you're doing, what you want to do, go study them. If there's someone already doing it, go study everything about them, but then start looking for what I call point of differences that can separate you now and take it to a different level. And that's competing 101, and that's what you have to do, because you don't want to reinvent the wheel. Jeff Bezos, when he talks about Amazon, he just said some things are going to be true, not just today, but 20 years from now, 30 years from now, for their business model. And one of them is they're always going to want low prices. They're always going to want a speedy service and delivery. Yep. And that's what they're executing on. And they're hyper-focused on the customer experience. So that's what we have to do as restaurateurs. And I like to tell our staff, and especially our senior leadership, that, when that door opens at the front, our focus should go there. I mean, everybody's focus should go there, whether or not they're going to go deal with that guest. Yep. There may already be someone there, but where's their focus? And it can't be just their 3 or 4 or 5 table section. It's the entire restaurant. If they see something, help out.
It's a good point. I mean, people walk in to an establishment. Acknowledgement is such a crucial thing. I mean, some restaurants, when you walk in, everybody greets, makes it a point to greet, or whatever the case may be. But it's and I like your tutelage to the employees in terms of a culture to every individual employee is, hey, this is your own business. This is your responsibility. Care for it like it's your own. I'm sure you've probably had a few people that have left to start their own business. I mean,
Had a few, yes.
and that's great. That's from a good guidance in that capacity. And so I'm glad to hear that.
You know, at the end of the day, I mean, we've lost some really good people, and at the end of the day, like I have to remind myself, it's it's their life, but it's their life, and I'm happy for them. I'll be thrilled for them because they can now chart their own way if that's so what they choose. And a lot of them, we've had people leave and come back. The best advice anyone can have for leaving a job is always leave on great terms.
Yeah.
That way you can always come back if you have to. But
very good point.
The saying, he who goes around burning bridges better be a good swimmer.
Yeah.
And
that's a good point. There's another quote.
Yeah. Yeah. So leave on good terms. Yeah. We've had a lot of people come back.
Yeah. If you had a message, you were talking to some, aspiring business owners, people that are on the cusp of trying to, maybe they've got an idea, they got some things they want to do, regardless of industry. What are some things, that you just flat out suggest that are crucial to keeping them on track?
Keeping their overhead extremely low.
Yeah.
Yeah. And try not to be in the little fish and the big pool, but you want to be the big fish in the little pond. Don't go head to head with people that have the capital to help survive you, outgive you, because you can't compete with that. Go find a niche. Go in these underserved markets and get established and learn all your lessons there before you go in and compete with the big boys, so to speak. I mean, even Walmart, when they first started, they were in the rural areas of the country, and it wasn't until they were ready to come into more urban, high population areas that they just blow up. But I remember in the 70s, seeing Walmart in Angleton and just these little small stores.
Yeah, but everybody went to it. That's a very good point. I mean, and the other point that you talk about with Amazon is true. They're doing the same thing, but doing it a different way that nobody thought is competitively possible, which is, by mail and or by online ordering. Everybody's traditionally, it's still the same thing. You want low prices, you want speedy service and delivery of everything. And but they did a paradigm shift of you not having to go there. I mean, the DoorDashes and all those kind of things. The same thing. Now I go into a restaurant, I go sit in Gringo's, and two other people come walking in, and they got their phone in their hand. They're like, "Oh, for John, all right, here you go." And boom, they walk out the door. How much of your business is that? How much?
Quite a bit. Ever since COVID, it's increased. It's probably getting closer to between 25 and 30%, depending on location. It's just more convenient. So. Back in the late 80s, El Toro was doing deliveries. But back then it was so different because, for one, we had to hire our drivers.
Yep.
And they would just hang around the storeroom until they had an order. But the way the orders came in was a guest would call the restaurant, cashier would answer, and they would want to know what's on the menu.
Yep.
And you had to kind of give them some ideas.
Yeah, you guys know online menu.
Oh my God, it was.
And then you're paying for somebody to wait there to deliver when.
And then key maps. There wasn't Google Maps. It was key maps. You had to find it on a key map, and then you would have to ask the guest, "Are you paying with credit card or cash?" And they would take the right change back. It was just And
actually, it's everything.
Yeah, for sure.
And it's incredible.
But it's home delivery is it's amazing what DoorDash and Grubhub and some of the others have been able to do because of technology. And I don't know if people really understand what's going on, but I want to say DoorDash is in sales, they're one of the largest food service companies in the world.
Isn't that something?
And yet they don't own one kitchen.
I was going to say, they don't own anything. They contract out a bunch of delivery people.
And they get part of their revenue from the customer and a good chunk from the business. So there's this spread that they just want to increase on both ends, and they could easily be making 20%. So and more.
And then having the competition of the Grubhub and a few other different companies competing to do that keeps them from, gouging everybody. And it's just, the Uber, I think it all started with kind of the Uber model. Yes. Just to your point earlier, before the restaurant would have to hire somebody or there'd be a delivery service that would have to hire all the employees, pay for company vehicles, do all these different things. Once Uber came out and said, yeah, just have a clean car. This is the standard you have to maintain it by. And the app can manage all the finances and directions and communication between, and now that's all carried over into food. And is there anything else in your industry that you see as potentially upcoming paradigm shifts that, that are suddenly going to be, the airports just now are announcing that now you're not allowed to have to do boarding passes and things like that. It's going to be a journey pass and it's going to be on your phone. And when you walk into the airport, you're going to get scanned. And, is technology or anything coming into your world that is going to be different? The
guest experience. So we're a full service restaurant, and I'll often think about, is there a way to streamline the entire experience? Mm-hmm. So there's still a delay in, for example, one minor delay is in paying for your check. Hey, sir, I need my check. And that can delay some valuable time for the guest and everyone else. But, we do have, or we've had, I have to double check if we still have it, but the QR code on the bottom of our guest receipt so the guests can use their phone and pay right there and leave. Instead of giving their credit card to the server to take back to the bags. So everything is about efficiency at every stage. And, will it come to, and again, we're a full service. Will it come to where a guest just walks in, goes to maybe an assigned table number that they can find QR code, or I don't like QR codes, but if they were to pull the menu up and order off whatever piece of equipment, whether it's an iPad or their phone, and then the food's brought to their table, no server really involved, other than maybe someone coming around to bring them the drinks and salsa and deliver their food. Mm-hmm. I don't know. But I will say that it is, we are dealing with a different workforce today with Gen Z, but, in order to staff one restaurant, it requires us about 160 team members total.
Wow.
Of that, 60 to 70 can be servers. Mm-hmm. And if you think about the process of having to train servers on every menu item, it's complicated.
Yeah.
And
because you expect when you go to a restaurant, I ask somebody, what do you think about the ground meat tortillas versus the fajita tacos, or what's your, and when they say, I've never had that, or I don't know, no opinion, you're like, oh.
Yeah, no, it's and that's why if you can do all that and do it well, it would be very successful, because a lot of operators just can't deliver at that level.
And it's interesting because when you start describing that scenario where you come in, maybe you say, all right, I'm pulling into the parking lot, all right, I'm at Gringo's, and they say, you're assigned table number 6, just go right to it, and here's, you can pre-order something as you get in there. I think of that and I go, well, that's kind of a, bad experience. I mean, there's no interaction like that, but you just said it, but the Gen Z, the between the millennials, Gen Z, and then what's the new generation, the betas, there's so much more less contact.
Well, they grew up with technology.
Yeah, and they grew up less with sitting down having a face-to-face conversation. So for them, it's probably normal, fine. And maybe because when we grew up with full service or self-serve, you pulled into a gas station.
Yes,
a lot of kids never realized that there was places that you pulled in and you didn't get out of your car.
Right.
They came up, wiped your windshield off, filled up your gas, checked your tires.
In some states, it's still that way.
Yeah, and so. But that is interesting, how much technology might change some things in that capacity and make it real much more efficient. I went to Europe recently, and I'm starting to see it more here, but I didn't realize it a couple of years ago. I go to pay. Now their process is much slower. They're not in a hurry to do things, but when you are ready for your check and they came walking over, they had the handheld device, and I pull up my credit card and then just, your bill, swipe it, or put it in, here's your receipt. They never had to walk away. And now I've seen that more over the last year or so of more people having handhelds. Chili's, I think, for the longest time has it at the station there. And so, but yeah, that costs money though. You're either renting to have that unit or renting or buying those handhelds, and eventually, like you're talking about, having it on their phone, QR code. So is there anything I might have missed in any discussion that you definitely want to make sure we share or cover, again, in any capacity, whether it's something you want to give advice on, whether it's something up and coming? Because I wasn't even thinking about the technology until we started talking, and I thought, kind of good to get your insight on something like that. But
well, one of the things that we're facing, speaking of the pay at the table devices.
Yeah.
So currently, if a server takes your credit cards and brings you your receipt, and then you leave a tip on that receipt, the server later will have to go and enter that tip on the system. When they do that, we're charged now twice, or we're charged a different processing fee for that reason. So one of the reasons we want to use a device, and a lot of restaurants use it for this reason, is because when they insert the card, it reads the chip, and there's only one transaction, and their cost, their processing fee is lower. But
and then the tip is included.
Yes, it's also included there too. So one of the challenges that we've had is, since we do not use a chip reader, some restaurants, and it happens at different locations, but apparently some consumers know this, but they can dispute a charge. Mm-hmm. And that we have even if we have the signature,
they can stop the payment?
They can literally stop the payment.
Okay.
I forget exactly how the process goes, but because the card left their presence, they're able to dispute that.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay.
And, but we're looking for ways to solve that, because it can add up to hundreds of dollars a month.
How else are you diversifying the business? You can touch on catering.
Well, one of the things we want to do on any catering is make sure that we're able to execute as quickly as possible, depending on the size of the party.
Yeah. And
we have found that for every 25 meals, we have to have at least one team member per 100, or 25. So if it's 104, and but we're always also, so one of my pet peeves is seeing a person go through a buffet line where we're doing a full service, and they're given 2 plates to hold, and there's still chips and everything else.
Yeah.
So
how often have you seen that?
Well, it's too often. But recently I was at a book signing, and we gave them everything they needed in a little carry bag, which helped out really nicely, because they used the bag as for their book when they left. But they were able to just grab and go, so to speak. So it worked out really well for them. And but we're always looking for ways to just improve efficiency and not be so burdensome just because you're having a meal catered. Because there are so many things you have to think about.
Do people seem more in a rush today than they were 20 years ago, or is it roughly the same? Or what? How has the client changed over the last 20 years?
Well, I think it's really all dependent on the individual. That some may want to just get in; they don't want the whole sales pitch. Look, I know what I want. Just bring me this, and get and go, eat and go. But there's still those that want the dining experience more so at night than daytime. In the daytime, you just want to get in and out.
Yeah.
But our servers, we tell them there's a distinct difference between service and hospitality. Service is what people expect. The service is what people expect. Hospitality, at the end of the day, is how you make the guests feel, and it's important that a server has to read the table, because a lot of times they just want to be left alone. But it's still, you still want to make sure that a smile goes a long way when greeting a guest or waiting on a guest. So there's a lot of psychology to serving guests, serving the public in general. So.
And that's a good point. I mean, you comment on the fact that, you got to read your clients. I mean, how many times, there's some days I go eat and we're just having a festive time. We're cutting up to the waiter, talking, we've got no time frame and enjoying ourselves. Other times we're going to eat, we got to sit down. There's a serious topic we need to discuss and you don't want to be bothered, and you appreciate the servers that recognize that and even know what the circumstance is in some capacity.
A good example of that, there's a retail store near where I live called My Fit Foods.
Yeah.
And I know the owner, Mario. And I had lunch with them recently, and I was just giving some feedback because my wife goes there and grabs these pre-made meals, and she enjoys them, and I enjoy them. And but when she goes there, she just goes in and go to the region to grab her meals and go to the counter. But they were so overdoing her visit when they would, hey, how are you? How are you doing? And what are you doing this weekend? Just asking all kinds of crazy questions. And can I carry this out to your car for you? And when she'd come home, she'd say, look, all I want to do is go in there and get my meal.
Yeah, I
don't need all that. And I passed that feedback on to Mario, and apparently it worked because I went in just the other day to pick up a few meals, and they're now paying attention to who's walking in and how they walk in and where they go, because usually you can tell if it's a first time patron or someone that's a regular that knows what they want. They just want to get in and out.
Yep.
And so feedback is important. We listen to everything people tell us. We learn the most from our guest complaints.
Yep.
Because we could receive an email complaint about this long, and it's very easy to get defensive, but you can't. You have to remove the emotions from it and actually remove their emotions from it and get down to the heart of what was the problem. And, a guest complaint at the end of the day is just an opportunity to resell them.
Yep.
And many, many times they'll become more loyal than ever before because now there's a more personal connection between the guest and the business. So although we don't like them, I welcome them, especially if we can learn something from them to get better.
Well, for customers, you've heard them. They had a concern, and you acknowledged them. You responded, and you helped them. Yeah, everybody's going to be much more loyal in that capacity rather than somebody that does get defensive and argue the point.
You'll never win an argument.
And then they'll spread it to everybody they know about that experience, and it goes downhill from there. And I also like what you'd mentioned earlier, and with Perkins saying, I will run this like I own it. That's
big words.
That's the other component. That's how you want all your employees to be. And because, like you said, you can't be there. You can't oversee 2,600 employees,
exactly,
in locations, and
exactly. I'm only one person. I'm not scalable.
Yeah.
But the philosophy of the company can be scalable.
Yes.
And that's really what's going to take you.
Yep.
Where you want to go.
It's good. And so technology is there to help things become more efficient. But yet, I like your distinction between service. Yeah, I expect to arrive at the restaurant, get a meal. Everything the way it was the last time. I love the comment. If you're going to serve a bad cup of coffee, serve it the same way every time, because then if somebody likes that burnt coffee or whatever, they want to come back and get it every time. And I think that's invaluable in terms of advice for business owners or aspiring owners. But yeah, distinguishing service from hospitality is a huge deal because, having the experience helps. Again, it's people doing business with people.
All right.
How many of your long-time servers working for your restaurant have a lot of regular customers that come back to see, come back to eat your food, but to see those people that they regularly engage with. And so, and I get it all starts from the top. It all starts from culture. And I think you've done a fantastic job, and the success has shown it that, that you're able to scale that and keep that consistent message. And so congratulations to you on that.
It all goes back to the golden rule. Just treating everyone the way you want to be treated. And
Yep.
it's amazing how that one act alone, that one habit alone can take a person very far in life. But they have to be very consistent with it. I mean, it's not something you practice with one person and not practice on another. I always tell people that I'm grateful that when I can go to a grocery store and there's a person there to check me out, they added value to my life by being there.
Yeah.
And treating everyone is one thing, but also truly wishing the best upon other people, because people are very inconsistent when it comes to that. They could say, "Yeah, I wish you the best, but that guy over there, I don't like him. I hope he just whatever."
Yeah.
You can't be that way.
No,
you
not
have
at
to be
all.
the same toward everyone, because like I say, one of my quotes is, "Everything you do to and for others, you're actually doing to and for yourself."
Yep.
So I'm sitting here today because of how I've always treated other people.
Yep.
And that's the one thing I have control over.
And it's very clear when the failure of businesses shifted over to the success of your businesses was the viewpoint of passion over profit.
Right.
All of a sudden, it was a passion to serve, your customers over how much profit can I make in this business.
Right.
What I
It was just a story in the Chronicle today about this Mexican restaurant in Houston that is, I believe at one of their locations, they're charging for chips and salsa.
yeah.
And Michael Berry had emailed me asking me, "Hey, what are your thoughts on this?" And so I actually shared it on X, and I said, the red sauce, the green sauce, the chips, and the ice cream account for 6% of our food cost. And we would never charge for that. I would rather basically just educate or inform our guests that every chip has 18 calories. You can eat as many as you like. Yeah.
There you go.
Put the guilt back on them.
That's a great strategy. And here's a so I think it's interesting because at first, so I grew up in the comfort food industry. My parents owned a donut shop. But with the donuts, I mean, even kolaches, there's just nothing healthy about it. It's a comfort food, it's something that you just want that tastes great, and regardless of the health challenges it brings down the road, there's nothing you can do about that. At least in your world, because I've always looked at Mexican food as a comfort food, but at least over the years, you can make it healthy. You can have the meat, the fajitas, you can have the pico de gallo, you can have the salsa, you can have the guacamole, you can even include beans if you wanted to. You just cut out the tortillas and the rice and
Refried beans.
Yeah,
Cut those three out.
Yeah,
They're good.
yeah, exactly. So because that was one of my things that I remember thinking about too, that I was going to ask you in terms of just, how do you deal with all the keto, all the changes in what everybody's doing, but your menu allows people to be flexible. And I think that's.
Yeah, it is. And we do have, our servers are trained to know how to respond when they ask for that and how they can modify a dish to meet their requirements.
And catering, how do you, how much of that is your business? How much, catering does your.
We're probably around 10% catering.
10%. And is that pretty typical? I mean, or do you want to grow that more?
It really all depends, because it just really depends on location and the staffing.
Yeah.
So here at LaPorte, Gringo's, we do quite a bit because of the refineries.
Yeah.
And but it does require, we do a lot of deliveries, which is still catering, but when I'm talking about catering, it's full service catering.
Yeah, you're going out.
But we've done several thousand for Methodists, huge caterings, and talking about an army to execute that. I have several lines set up because they have all these employees coming down, and they have to get them out within a certain time frame, and they're able to do it if you organize and get ready for them.
And you said it's one person for every 25
meals.
Yeah. And how hard is it to maintain the quality of the food, once it's going to be transported?
100% of what we do is it's very important. It's all about food handling. So every ingredient has to be handled differently. But we just even with our fajitas, when we do a catering, how we package them after they've been cooked, they actually it gets better. The product gets better because it's sitting in its own juices and it just
it's resting.
Yeah, like brisket.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And one other thing I want to touch on, because probably back to the book and like we were talking about, it's like I become much more conscious of food quality and different things like that. And you commented on it when you did an inspection of
the pico de gallo, maybe?
No, the meat, and how the customers would carry out the extra, was it grease?
Oh, no. So what that was...
Talk about that, because that is... When you think about people's business practices being one way, and then how you looked at it, it was very...
Well, it goes back to, if I won't eat it, I don't want to serve it. Yeah. So what had happened several years ago, we had toured a meat packing plant in Pasadena, and they were giving us a tour of the facility, and I just walked past this drum, industrial drum, and I peeked in it, and it looked like dog food. That's what it looked like. So I just asked the guy who was giving the tour, what is this? He said, it's a filler that they use to mix into a ground beef for a chain of restaurants. I'm not going to mention the name, but a chain of restaurants. And what this filler does, so if we cook, for example, let's say 100 pounds of ground beef, we're going to lose 10 to 14% and just cook off the grease from the ground beef. We'll drain that. What this product does, if you cook 100 pounds of ground beef, they'll add 10 pounds of this filler, which acts as a sponge. It soaks up all the cook-off. So they're able to increase their yield. So while we lose, let's say, 15%.
Yeah.
So we go down to 85 pounds of usable product. Yeah. They just increased 110 pounds. Because they didn't lose anything.
Yeah.
So the guests are the ones that are consuming this and carrying it out. Again, I'm not going to mention the name, but I will say what's interesting is the same company. I knew their president, and this other distributor did a cutting for him, which is basically showing them samples, and they had a bottom tier product, a medium, and a top of the line product. And he went through and tasted every one of them. He says, that one would prefer to get a cheaper one. Because again, in the back of his mind, he's just thinking about bottom line.
Yeah.
And I've always told our staff, look, as so long as we can focus on the top of the plate, that's where our focus is at. The bottom line will take care of itself. Mm-hmm. And so that's, again, when it was, whatever service or product you're delivering to the consumer, focus on that. You can always adjust pricing eventually.
Yeah.
You need to.
Yeah.
But focus on what you're delivering, because that's most important.
Yeah.
Don't get hung up on the numbers too soon.
Well, and it's becoming more and more evident today with just the movement that's happening in terms of what is in all of our different foods. Now we're being taught more and more. Years ago it came out where the labels had to be much more distinguished and everything, but now they're starting to really dive into are there fillers? Are there chemicals? Are there, which preservatives, different things like that? And yeah, I want to know whether I'm consuming something like that, because I wonder why my stomach hurts when I go eat this place and not another place.
We definitely have way too many overly processed foods on the market.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
But I do want to share this one story to close out.
Yeah.
So I touched on the golden rule as being something that's really made a major impact in my life. And I can never talk about it enough, because very recently, a couple of years ago, I went to a political event at the Posto in Houston. Mm-hmm. And I met a young man there, about 40 years old. And he joined me and a couple of my friends that I was with. And he introduced himself. We exchanged contact information. And I could tell he was just wanting to make friends, just want to meet people. And a few weeks later, he reaches out to me to have lunch or coffee. And we settled on coffee. So I met him at a local Starbucks. And that was that. And then about 6 months ago or less, actually about 3 months ago, he reaches out to me again to have coffees. And I didn't know he's in investments. His group, they manage, let's say, $200 million in assets, but they buy distressed and stabilized properties. And he asked me to meet again for coffee, and I could have said, I just don't have time for it, but I didn't. I made time for him. I said, okay, well, meet me at Adair's restaurant around the corner from where I live. And we met at 8 o'clock one Wednesday morning. And we met for about an hour. But toward the end of our meeting, I had commented how much I really had admired the hotel chain, the Four Seasons, and the founder especially. His name is Isidore Sharp.
Mm-hmm.
And Isidore, he lives in Canada, but Isidore started the Four Seasons the year I was born, 1961.
Mm-hmm.
Grew to 129 properties in 44 states, or 44 countries. And so I mentioned that to Judah, a young Jewish man, and that, one of my life's dreams would be to meet Isidore Sharp, which would be very difficult because he lives in Toronto, and he's 94 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And Judah looks at me and says, Russ, I think I may be able to make that happen. I said, well, if you can, great. Turns out Judah's from Toronto, and so was Isidore Sharp. He didn't know him personally, but he said, I'll see what I can do. So not even a week later, he sends me an email from Isidore Sharp's secretary, Non Wilkins, who's been with Isidore for 30, 40 years as his executive assistant. And the email just says, Judah, Mr. Sharp would gladly meet with you and your friend at his residence on April the 2nd. So I ended up meeting Isidore Sharp at his home in Toronto, along with his wife, Rosalie. They got married when she was like 18 years old. And that was an incredible experience, as you can imagine.
Mm-hmm.
And I asked myself, how did it happen? And it was just because I was treating someone the way I wanted to be treated.
Yeah.
And then just last week, I had dinner. I had dinner with Gary Peterson at his house because he bought this dinner at the Children's Charities.
Okay.
And the guest, the honored guest was 50 Cent.
Oh,
Curtis Jackson.
yeah. He's
And he's a Houstonian now. And so I had dinner with him. So one week I meet Isidore. The next week I meet 50 Cent. And then this past Saturday, I meet Billy Bob Thornton.
Did you really?
And got a picture with him and Galveston. And
Is he in the state? Does he live here now?
I don't know where he lives, but he's in a band. And he was performing at the Wildcatters Gala at Galveston this past Saturday. And I was there, and me, Michael Berry, and Gary Peterson, we all got a picture with him.
Okay, because I knew he's doing Landman, the new show, but I didn't know if they filmed in Texas or not.
They actually did film.
That's good, yeah.
But yeah, so these experiences, I mean, they're really phenomenal. And it's not like I actually really pursued them, but they kind of just start landing on your lap because, again, of how you interact with every single person you meet, everybody.
How you treat others is that how you want to be treated.
Yep.
Now, and I think that's probably the lesson that others should take from this and from your success and the things that you've been able to accomplish in life.
I don't know how else to explain them.
Yeah.
I mean, I really don't.
Yep. And that's a biblical principle. That is something that a lot of people forget about that comes from the Bible. And so, yeah, that's fantastic. Well, thank you. Thank you for taking the time. A good conversation, learned a lot about everything, but I really hope a lot of people will take from this and be able to continue and take some of these principles for themselves as they venture off and see what they can accomplish.
Yeah. Well, thank you for having me. Pleasure was all mine.
Absolutely. And so on behalf of the Economic Alliance Houston Port Region, and of course, Chevron, our sponsors here in the studio here, my name's Steve Cody, and this is the Owner Origins Podcast.